Hello, I'm Brenda Harris from Cobb County Storytellers.
Hello, E pluribus unum here, but don't worry about that. My friends call me Bus. Why are you looking at me like that? I'm a mouse. I'm a revolutionary mouse. And have I got a tale for you? This story is part of your history as Americans, and it happened on Christmas in the winter of 1776. I was there, and I'll tell you exactly how it went down. Well, Christmas 1776, my Uncle Horatio was bewailing the fact that he had left a fine wedge of cheese on a boat docked on the banks of the Delaware River. Now, all of us mouselings were huddled together in our home that we carved out of the baseboards of a colonial house. We were gathered by his chair, by the hearth, by the fire, waiting for him to launch into one of his extraordinary tall tales. Mice, you see, are excellent storytellers. But Uncle Horatio was not in a storytelling mood that night. He was in a bewailing mood over that wedge of cheese which he said would make him a fine Christmas repast. Now, no one wanted to venture out into the bitter cold that night, but I loved my Uncle Horatio so, and when his big, sad eyes grabbed the cockles of my heart, I felt my little mouse hand rising in the air when he gave one last pitiful plea for volunteers. "I knew I could count on you, Bus," he crooned, as he walloped me on the back, all the time stuffing on boots and jacket and mittens and hat, and shuffled me to the door, and then slam! I heard it shut against the cold winter air. I looked around. I was alone, in the dark, and the wind, and the cold. I hunkered down and made it to the banks of the Delaware, and there I found my uncle's favorite ship. I hopped inside to sniff out that cheese, when all of a sudden, bam, the boat rocked. Bam, the boat reeled. Bam, bam, the boat teetered and tottered as boot after boot climbed in. Oh dear, I scurried to hide under some boards and waited out until the humans got through with whatever they were up to, but I decided to listen. I have found that you can learn a lot if you keep your big mouth closed and your big mouse ears focused. And I learned that these were patriots. I love patriots. They put feathers in their hat and make macaroni. And I love macaroni. Macaroni and cheese. But the patriots were not about making macaroni that night. No, their mission was secret and clandestine and undercover and serious. So I listened as they spoke in soft, muffled tones. Now, by this time, I was freezing. So I climbed up the nearest boot and up the leg and under the thick woolen coat and into the breast pocket of the first man I came to. And it did not take long before I realized that I, E pluribus unum, was in the pocket over the heart of General Washington himself. Wow, the tale I will have to tell. Now, I want you to know that I am a fine discerner of sounds due to these extreme God-given ears, and I have heard my share of heartbeats, but the General's was like none I have ever heard. It was lyrical. It was musical. It was bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 bum. General Washington, my hero. Well, as I waited in the pocket, I learned more about the amazing plan of the brazen maneuver that General Washington had planned. You see, months ago, the British had driven the Patriots out of Long Island, across New York, across New Jersey, across the Delaware River, and into Pennsylvania. And that's where they stayed, discouraged, exhausted, cold, sick. Many of them did not have proper clothing for the winter, and some of them did not have shoes. They wrapped their feet in rags and stood bleeding in the snow. And this ragtag group of soldiers was pitted against the most sophisticated fighting force in the world at that time. Things looked bleak, but General Washington did not give up. Oh no, he had an amazing plan. Now, across the river in Trenton, New Jersey, there was a large camp of Hessian soldiers. Hessians, that's just what the Germans called themselves in those days. They were mercenaries, which meant they were paid by the British to fight the Patriots for them. But one thing you need to know about Hessians is they like to tip a pint, and they especially like to quaff their grog on Christmas Day. And this is exactly what General Washington was counting on. His plan was to cross the Delaware on Christmas night, to march 9 miles to Trenton, and attack the Hessians on December 26th. But for his plan to work, he had to catch them by surprise, and no one would expect an attack on Christmas. So on Christmas night, 1776, General George Washington and 2,400 of his men, the main body of his army, crossed the Delaware River under egregious conditions. A freak winter storm spun up. But we had the Massachusetts Marblehead Battalion, and they were expert navigators in these conditions. Now, we had to break the ice away just to get the boats in the water, and we had to keep pushing away the hazardous floes from the bow to proceed. But that night, boatload after boatload of patriots was carried across the Delaware. Now, it took longer than Washington planned, and it was a lot more difficult than he thought to get the 18 cannon across. Each cannon weighed 1 ton, and to maneuver heavy artillery like that in severe winter conditions is dangerous and slow-moving job. Once across, we still had the 9-mile march to Trenton, and it was 4 a.m. before we got underway. Now, I want you to remember that this is Christmas, when most people are enjoying the warmth of family and friends. But these patriots gave that up for America, for their children, for you. Merry Christmas, Americans. Now, after a while, we met the Hessians. They came stumbling out at us, clumsy from their grog and clumsy on their guns. But when they heard the authority of the American cannon, they tucked tail and ran to a nearby orchard. I had to see this, so I climbed up in the general's hat. A while later, they rallied and returned at us again, beating their drums. But when their commander was mortally wounded, regiment after regiment surrendered. The battle lasted 2 hours, but in the end, we had not lost many patriots, and General Washington's army had captured 900 Hessian soldiers and all of their artillery. Finally, a patriot victory. Huzzah! Huzzah! Now, that was not the end of your war for independence. Many more battles were necessary, but the patriots were so pumped by the daring victory they had won that Christmas. They had pure liberty flowing in their veins and a strong resolve to sacrifice their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for America, for their children, for you. And that is why we should never forget their sacrifice, and we should give them gratitude, honor, and respect. And that is why we should also remember that on Christmas, everyone is not enjoying the fellowship of family fun and food. Many patriots are still giving their service to America. We have soldiers, doctors, nurses, paramedics, firemen, police officers. These are our true American heroes, and we owe them our gratitude, honor, and respect. Well, I finally made it home. Hey, and I found that wedge of cheese. Uncle Horatio is still trying to decide if he believes my tale. And if you don't believe me, well, check it out. Your library has a book on this very event, When Washington Crossed the Delaware by Lynn Cheney. It's written from the human perspective. I can only tell you what I saw and heard from General Washington's pocket. But mind you, I had a front row seat, and my tale is coming straight from the heart. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 bum. Merry Christmas, America.